So hello, friends. My name is Andrea, and I'm here this morning with my friend Ken. Some of you might recognize Ken because he has been one of the monitors on Thursday nights at Highlands for some time now. And Ken and I are gathering this morning because we wanted to have a conversation about online safety, security, privacy, all of those things that we're really starting to consider more because we're spending all of our time in this space. So we thought that this would be a great opportunity to ask some of those basic questions, to get into some of the nitty gritty of what making the most secure setup can look like for us. And we just wanted to dive in and let you listen to our conversation. I know when people listen to conversations like this, they're worried that they're not going to be able to understand a single word that you're saying. Lots of big words get thrown around in the tech world. And I notice, Ken, behind you, you are kind of taking on this otherworldly appearance. And I think that might be the fear for some people, that this is going to be like otherworldly information. So I'm going to do my best to kind of guide our conversation in a way that makes the responses manageable for people. But before I do that, do you want to tell me a little bit about what's going on behind you there?
What's going on behind me? Hey, well, we're on Zoom, and one of the things Zoom allows you to do is put up the background of your choice. And I guess the reason I'm doing that is I'm kind of in a home office, which isn't the tidiest office around. There's an embarrassment factor there as well. Plus, it might be distracting for people looking at all the clutter behind me and whatnot. So I just picked a static image here to put up and help people avoid looking at my mess. And my wife really appreciates me doing that too.
I love it. So Ken, thank you again so much for being here with us. I'm wondering, before we get started, if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and why we're asking you to have this conversation with us about online security, privacy, and that whole thing.
Sure, of course. Yeah, like, why should you listen to a word I say? Well, let's start. First and foremost, I'm a geek. I've always been a geek for as long as I can remember. And that led me to a career in electronic computer engineering, which started 40 years ago, before there was an internet. And ever since then, I've been very into it, as they say, and have been, as well as working with technology on a day-to-day basis, I've effectively been the tech support guy for friends and family for forever. And I've always taken a keen interest in what technology can do for us, but also what the risks are and how to use it properly, that kind of thing.
Right.
So as such, I think, I've got the background to kind of understand what's going on, what kind of questions to ask, and evaluate the answers, and hopefully guide people a little bit about what some of the pitfalls and hazards are.
Yeah. So that's fantastic. We're all glad to know someone like you, because it seems like there is so much information out there. It can be really overwhelming. A lot of us are using the internet right now a lot more regularly than we maybe have been in the past, especially certain generations of people. So I guess my first question is really, why are we talking about this?
Because there really are some risks out there. I mean, it's certainly not the case that if you ever go on the internet, something bad is going to happen to you. Absolutely not. But there are things that, if you're not careful, can happen. It's about managing your risk as you do things. And there are some very straightforward things that you can think about and do to really minimize the chance of anything nasty happening. So I think that's the main reason. I think we want to educate people a little bit in what those pitfalls and hazards are, and what they can do about them.
Right. So we will have a couple of follow-up sessions. There'll be 6 in total. We're thinking, who knows, that could change.
Sure.
But the hope is that today we talk about who you are, why we should care about this kind of stuff, and realistically what the risks are that people are facing when they go online. So that seems like as good a place as any to start.
There's really two main categories that risk falls into, and everyone's heard the words. It's security and privacy, security and privacy. And they can be used somewhat interchangeably to refer to just being safe out and about online, but they're really quite different. So security for the internet is really just like security for your home. You know, when you're at home, you lock the doors, you lock the windows, maybe you have an alarm system. It's all about keeping things out that you don't want to come in. And that's really what the focus of security is. I mean, specifically on your PC, it's malicious software or malware getting onto your machine to do various nasty things. Privacy, on the other hand, is really the opposite. And that's all about keeping information that you consider private from getting out of your machine out onto the internet without your knowledge or permission. So it's a slightly different way of thinking, but you know, everything really falls into those two categories. I think of the two, clearly security is the primary one, because if you have poor security and things are getting into your systems and trolling through your data, your privacy is gone anyway. So I think our initial focus is very much going to be on security, and then we'll move on to the privacy aspects a little bit later.
You mentioned a couple of big words in there that I don't understand, like malware. So I guess what are we worried about happening if we have poor security or poor privacy?
At the end of the day, it's all about money for most people. So theft, let's call it. And initially, it's data theft, which then leads to a number of other things as a consequence. So if you get malware or malicious software onto your machine, it's usually done for a couple of reasons. I mean, a few years ago, it was just malicious. Software would get on your machine and just delete all your files because they could. And that still happens today, but it's much rarer. The main reason people now steal your data is to find out more about you, so they can impersonate you online, or identity theft. It's a big topic. It's in the news all the time. So the more someone else knows about you as an individual, the easier it is for them to phone up your bank or phone up TELUS or Shaw and pretend to be you to get access to your account. They'll be downloading pay-per-view on your dime, whatever it is. That's identity theft. You can't recover from it, certainly once you know what's happening, but part of the problem is it can take a while before you know it's happening, if they're being subtle about it. And it can take a long time. Actually, a good friend of our family got hit with this just last year, and it took months for her to basically recover everything to the right degree. The other thing data theft leads to is essentially blackmail, which is known as ransomware. They don't actually take your data away. What they do is they encrypt it, scramble it all up, so you don't have access to it anymore. And then if you don't pay them, they won't unscramble it for you. I think that's one of the things we'll be talking about in one of the sessions, is how to back up data effectively.
Right.
Some data is more important than others. Some data changes more frequently than others. What are the things you should be doing to protect yourself and recover from something like this? But underneath it all, it's basically software gets on your machine and takes your stuff in some form. The other big one, which is really the really creepy one, is surreptitious surveillance, where the software on your machine is turning on the microphone and camera and watching you in real time or recording you, which is clearly a gross invasion of privacy. The software that does that's generically called RATS, for remote access Trojan. Some more big words, and again, this can be quite common in some areas, deliberately so. There was a case in the United States a couple of years ago where a school board actually supplied its students with laptops, and on those laptops was this form of spyware. And and their argument was, well, it's valid. It's our machine, and so we can put on it what we want. So the third thing that can happen besides sort of surveillance and data theft is what's called turning your machine into a bot, which is short for robot. In this case, what the malicious software does is it makes your machine a slave effectively to some robot army that someone else is controlling, and they take that out onto the internet and use it to attack other people in some way. You may have heard of denial of service attacks, where websites are swamped and go down because they can't handle the amount of traffic. Bots are what do that in a lot of cases. So while it may not harm you on a day-to-day basis, just sitting in front of your machine, you know, when you're not looking, your machine is actually going out and helping attack other people.
Right.
So in a sense, it's the least serious, but you know, you still don't want to you want to avoid it if at all possible.
So Ken, you've made it pretty clear that we are going to dive into some of this in greater detail in sessions to come, which is fantastic. I have no doubt that you're going to be able to walk us through this in a way that makes us feel comfortable, because it sounds like while there is a lot of stuff out there that is potentially harmful, that is a little bit scary, that actually we all have the power to equip ourselves so that that isn't something we need to be frightened about.
As we said earlier, just getting on the internet does not mean something bad is automatically going to happen to you. I mean, I think of it as being like driving. You get in your car, you drive around all the time, and you know, as long as you drive carefully and obey the rules, it's fine. But there's always some level of risk that something's going to happen. Internet's kind of the same thing as security and privacy. A lot of it is really about behavior as opposed to running a specific kind of software, that kind of thing. And you know, so we'll be taking people through, well, what are those behaviors that really lower the risk even more of anything happening to you? So we're not trying to discourage people going online in any way whatsoever, but just doing very basic things can really help add to the protection.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And I look forward to continuing this conversation.